I was thinking kind of as a theme that we could do tonight to carry through, and I thought about light painting and taking an image that you might think is done and how to transform where you force the viewer to look. And we used to call it burning and dodging. Remember that? But I think it's kind of a lost art in Lightroom. And that's why I wanted to revisit it. And I'm going to play around a little bit. And of course, as always, I encourage and welcome your input. Some of them are going to involve some fixes right from the get-go. But some of them I'm going to, like I have some panoramics, we're going to bypass the panoramic construction just so you can see it. But yeah, we really don't need to get into all of that. So since we do have a fair amount to go through, because some of them are a little bit involved, and I'd like to, if possible, actually get through all the images that I have prepared tonight, or at least most of them. So let's get started. Let's get started with something simple. And again, if you guys would just give me a thumbs up that you can see my screen, so I can see you. Okay, let's get started. And for those of you that just joined, I see Paula. Is Paula, smile. There, Paul. Okay, Paula smiled. Okay. Yes, always nice to see you guys. And the you guys that are maybe if you don't have a camera, but you're welcome to turn your camera on. And when you have questions, feel free to turn your mic on and off as that happens. And as always, the chat window, which I actually don't have open right now. Diane, do you have that open? Mm-hmm. Diane's got the chat room open. So if you would just type any questions or whatever in there. Okay.
I'll just smack it.
Diane will just give me for those of you that are fans of NCIS, she calls it a Gibbs slap. When you slap up the back of the head. Anyway, all right, so let's start out with, oh, wait a second. We got to call it what it is. It's time for hors d'oeuvres. Let's get this thing going. And we're going to start with an image. It's one of my favorite little cascades. This is in a place called Raymondskill Falls, near Dingman's Falls in Pennsylvania. And I love this particular cascade. There's a secondary bigger cascade over here, and off to the right is the actual Raymondskill Falls, which is technically the tallest falls in Pennsylvania. It's pretty big. But I love this one. I love just kind of the diaphanous feeling of it. And I always like to shoot this as a panoramic. And there's all this stuff going on here, but what we want to do is get the viewer to look at the subject. So let's go into the develop module. And I'm going to make a virtual copy of this with Command apostrophe so we can jump back and forth to our original. All right, there's our virtual copy. So obviously I don't want this thing up. I'm already being asked a question. Yes, dear.
Do you have to have the left panel open when you're in the develop mode?
The question was, do you have to have the left panel open when you're in the develop mode? And the answer is no. I can just click on the little arrow here on the left edge, and there we go. So yes, that I agree with you. With the panoramic on this screen, it definitely gives us more real estate so you can see what's going on. By the way, also, you can control click in the gray area around your images in Lightroom, and it brings up a background color. So if you want a darker gray, that I don't like that because it's the same, but even darker, if you prefer, or even black, you can change the background over here rather than use that lighter gray. What do you guys like? Do you like this? Do you like the black better? Give me a thumbs up if you like the black. Thumbs, yeah, I figured you can probably see it better. Sam is, he's like this. Oh, Sam is enough thumbs up. Okay, fine. You can probably see it better, so we'll go with that. So yeah, just control or right click up in the area around the image, and you get the choice of the background color just around the image. All right. So as I look at this, I mean, the histogram goes all the way from the left to the right. It says there's a little bit of pure black. And if I put this on, you can see like underneath the trees, yeah, who cares? And there's some pure black in the dark parts of the branch. Again, nothing to worry about. My concern with this exposure was that nothing blew out. I wanted to protect the highlights as always. If I bring my magnifying glass down to this really bright part of this falls, which I'm going to cut off anyway, we can see it's as bright as it looks on the screen. If you look under the excuse me, if you look under the histogram, you can see it's only around 96%. So plenty of room there. I'm not going to, actually, you know what? I'm going to cut to the chase on the crop for now. I'm going to hit the R key. There's no reason to see this because I know I don't want it in the image, because this is all about this cascade right here. Do I need this much on the left? Probably not. I'm going to leave it for the time being. In fact, I'm going to leave a little bit of this here. We'll decide if we want to keep that or get rid of it later. So how do we help get to here? I'm going to do 2 graduated filters here. So I'm going to hit the layer mask here, and we're going to use this linear gradient. And again, I encourage you guys to remember these shortcuts: K for brush, M for gradient, and Shift M for radial gradient. So I'm going to use the M key. I'm just going to hit that, click around in here, and I'm going to drag across so that it matches the direction of the falls. And I'm going to bring down the exposure because we want the falls to be the hero in this. And look what happens just by doing that. We still have this other stuff off to the side that's interesting that you can go visit when you want. But by just doing that, this has become more powerful. Let's take it one step further and hit M again. This time I'm going to drag from the right to the left. And let's do the same thing and bring the exposure down there. In fact, let's do one more. This stuff on the bottom is too bright. We'll hit M again. This time I'm going to drag up from the bottom, and let's bring that down. And actually, as I'm looking at this, I'm going to undo that. Let's delete. I'm going to hit the delete on that one. Because this stuff was okay. It's really just this green right here. So let's hit the letter K to bring up our brush. Make sure auto mask is on. And I just want to bring down the green. Now, typically, you're having trouble seeing my green. The default color for when you're creating these masks is red. In general, I like the green better. I just want to get some of these other areas included, but I want to bring all of this stuff down. So let's just bring the exposure down, and let's bring down the highlights and maybe a little bit of the whites too. And there we go. I just wanted to get it enough, and I'm going to click again on some of these other little highlights in case I missed anything. I admit it was a little hard to see what was selected with green on the green leaves. I'm just going through and clicking on the spots that are still white. All right, so that's good. Let's hit enter on that. And we've already come a far way just with those little bit of changes. And if we look back at the original, there's what we started with. And here's where we are now. Okay, now it's time to do some light painting on this thing. For one, this tree here is getting lost a little bit. So let's hit K again. I'm going to make this just about the size of the tree trunk. And I'm just going to drag down. And yeah, I can be a little bit sloppy on this. Let's break this a little bit smaller as well. Not quite that small. And again, if you remember, click once, hold down Shift and click, and it will draw a straight line in between those two. Make it a little bit smaller. Click once, Shift, click. Whoops, Shift, click. Stop it. Shift, click. Okay, that's the area that I want to bring up. Let's bring up the exposure on that. And look, there's our tree. Now, for some reason, the color seems off. Because again, remember, in a scene like this, your camera can only do one color temperature. It's kind of unnaturally green, and this was not a green tree. So what are we going to do? We're going to make it less green. Let's make it a little more yellow and put in a little magenta in there. And then let's take out some saturation. And I'm working brighter than I need to. I just want to get a sense of the color that I want for the tree. I have been to this place many times. I know this tree. And I just want to make sure it kind of looks like I remember it. Good. Now that I've got that, now let's bring down the exposure a little bit, just so we can see the tree. And the question is, gee, do we want to do the same thing here? Well, we've already got it selected. All we have to do is hit Add with a brush and come over to this other tree, and let's do the same thing for here. And since it's just being added to, it's going to take exactly the same slider change as we did already, and just to add it to it, we're going to apply it. So one click, Let me make a look at one thing. Yep, that's good. And shift and shift. And you could see it added that same bit of brightness. Now this tree was darker, and that's okay. We're going to leave it that way. What else? As we look at the left side, this is still a little bit too bright. I like it as it comes through here. We're getting more definition on the falls itself. We're going to hit M again. And this time I'm going to kind of do one in this direction. And we're going to bring this down again. So that it's there. We want it to be part of the scene. But again, we don't want it competing. So we hit enter on there. Pretty good. Also around here, is there anything else we want to brighten or darken? I think so. Let's hit K. We'll get a bigger brush. We have a little mask on. Let's go ahead and make some of the dark gray rocks in here. We'll make them a little darker as well. So we draw around those and bring those down a bit. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then one more K. This time we're going to turn off auto mask. And what I'm after is really just the falls. Now, are there any paths we want to draw to bring you to the falls, to guide? I'm going to take a little bit of this stuff on the left, just as a visual helper. And let's bring up the exposure just a smidge here, just so that we've got a little bit more brightness. Do we want to change the color at all? Let's try it. Let's see if it needs a little bit of blue, just to separate it out a little bit. And the answer is actually no. It actually needs a smidge of yellow. Let's just add a little bit of yellow in there. And then we got to decide left, right, up and down. I'll hit enter on this. Let's hit R again for our crop. Maybe if we bring this down a little bit and bring this up on the bottom, where the goal is to maybe make the falls, the cascade here, a little bigger. Do I really need this tree on the left? I don't know. Let's find out. Is something like this going to work better? Let's hit enter on that. What do you think? I think no. I think it needs a little bit more, because now we have two elements. We've got the tree and the falls. The tree is bigger. It's competing. Where if we come over and just include a little bit of that third tree, look at the difference now. I still think maybe this tree might be a little too bright as I'm looking at it. So let's go back up to our masks. We'll find, let me scroll down so we can find our tree. Here's our tree mask. And let's just bring the brightness down a little bit more. Maybe not have it quite as bright as we made it. I think that's a better answer. Hit enter on that. And yes, now we can see the trees, but we're going to go to the falls. You're going to track this left to right. And if you consider, again, let me highlight the original. Let's go to full screen and I'll switch over to our raw file. Here's the raw file we started with. And what we did was took it from there to there. And it's a much nicer scene. I'm not sure about this. I think if I was going to spend the money and make a big print of this, that would have to go. And you're saying, well, let's do it then. So let's do it. I'm just going to use our little AI tool here and click on remove, and let's see how good a job it does. There's an image that I'm going to show you that I was playing with earlier. It added another waterfall. It's even worse. Let's see, 2, 3. This, we might have to do this in, actually that one's pretty good. I can live with that. Let's see what 2 was. Nope. 1 was definitely not. Yeah, they added a little cascade. 2, 3. Yeah, 3's the answer. I think we're good there. We take a look at that at full screen. And yeah, that actually helped the image a little bit. It gave us that very slight slope up on the bottom right, which again helps you get into the image. So pretty cool. Let's move on, because like I said, we got a lot of stuff to do tonight. I have another image just like this. I know it's another hors d'oeuvre, but I want to pursue this one because this one was actually interesting but difficult at the same time. This is at a nearby park. This is George Childs Park, which is right near Raymond's Kill. And I'm going to make a virtual copy of this one again. And how do we create direction here? You kind of end up looking all over. If I make it full screen, you can see, yeah, it's a kind of a pretty forest shot, but it's a background looking for a subject because there is nothing standing out. So that's what we have to fix. And I think we're going to do the same thing. Let's hit the M key for our gradient. And I'm going to drag across here. And let's darken this just the same way we did with the other one. Now, as we darken this, I'm going to bring the saturation up at the same time. I want to add some life to this, but make it darker, if that makes any sense. I'm also going to bring the highlights down a bit. All right, good. Let's do the same thing to the other side. Again, this time I'm going to come right up. I'm seeing this big tree as the main subject, along with this path right here leading into the woods. So let's bring this down and do the same thing. We'll add some saturation into there. And this is already starting to work. So we'll hit enter on that. Now we're going to get our brush involved. So I hit K, and what I'm after, well, let's do this tree first. I'm just going to drag on here, and notice I didn't use auto mask. I want to kind of get the area rather than the tree. And I want to bring this one up a bit. Just there, that looks better. And let's change the color temperature. I want to have it come closer to us. So we're going to make it a little warmer. Let's add some yellow to this. Oh yeah, make it look like the sun is getting through and hitting that. I'm going to add a little bit of magenta into it too. And that looks great. Now we've got some extra highlights. These highlights here are really bright. So let's hit K again. This time we're going to turn on auto mask. Let's come up to auto mask. Turn that on. These highlights are a visual distraction to me. They're good. We're going to leave them there, but we need to tone them down a bit because they're attracting too much attention because they're too bright. So in this case, let's bring the exposure down on those. Let's bring the highlights and the whites down. So we still have highlights, but now they're not just screaming at us. All right, K again. I'm going to turn off auto mask again. And we're going to create a path. Like if you were here, where would you walk to head into the woods? So I'm going to do that here. Now, technically, we don't have a destination here, but we have a path that's continuing to go around these trees. So that's a valid place to lead into the scene. Let's bring up this exposure a little bit. Good. And let's make this a little warmer as well. Again, we'll add some yellow. And obviously, again, with the fallen leaves, if the sun were to hit those, they would be warmer. And something like that. That's pretty good. We're going to use K again, our brush again. So this is the burning and dodging stuff that I was talking about. Again, we're going to turn off auto mask because I want this area up here, up top here, and perhaps over here as well, because it's a little too bright. I want to, again, focus on this area. So let's bring this down. Oh, yes. That's looking much better. Okay, now, as I look at this, I'm going to hit K again. Let's take a look at the end. Let's go to full screen in the image and see what we're seeing. This is looking a lot better, and you'll see really when we see the before and after. Distraction-wise, we've got some highlights on the left over here. We've got this shading going on over here, which is interesting, but we don't want it so bright so that it's drawing our eye. So let's come out of the full screen and do K again for our brush. And this time I'm going to grab these areas here. In fact, I'm going to turn auto mask on for the left side because I really just want to pick up on the highlights. So let's just find these highlight areas so that we can burn these down a little bit, even through the trees here. Now this stuff up into the sky, that's okay. There's also one bright spot right on the left side of this one tree. We're going to grab that too and bring it down because it's drawing the eye. So let's bring those down. We can bring those down quite a lot. And that's looking a heck of a lot better. In fact, one more. I'm going to hit K one more. This one little piece right down there is still too bright. Oh, look how much better that is. And in fact, over here, I don't like either. Let's get this darkened down. I don't want anything near the corners to draw you because that will lead you out of the image. All right, so let's hit enter on that. And one question, I'll be right there. Let me just show you something real quick. Let's go to full screen. So here's where we are now, but let's take a look at the raw file we started with. Look at the difference as that draws in. There's the original with the light as we were given it. And what we did by doing this light painting is we took this to there. And it's a dramatic difference. And now you're led in to the scene. You'll look at the peripheral stuff after you've gone through here, but now you're being guided. Yes, what was the question?
Can you explain the difference between mask and auto mask?
Okay, the question, so the difference was masking and when auto masking is on. Good question. So let's do it. Let's bring it up. So we'll create new mask and we're going to use the brush. Now, auto mask, if I have this big circle here, if I have auto mask on, and let's say I just want to choose this particular shadow, if I click on here, notice how it's ignoring the stuff mostly. This is not a great example. Let's see if I can find a better place. Let's whoops. Sorry, I just accidentally let go of the image. Let's do another one. Let's just do it. Let's hit a K. What would work best? Let's do the big tree here. So if I have auto mask on, as I paint, notice that even if there's a secondary line. There's the one line, and then there's a second one around it. That's the fade. When I choose this, if I have a really big mask and like say choosing this tree, notice it tries to only do the tree. In fact, I see what I can do. Oh, I hit that wrong key again. I see a better answer. Let's go to here. Let's say I just wanted to affect the blue sky. So let's hit K, and I zoom into a little piece of blue. And even though my circle's that big, since auto mask is on, and when I put the little crosshairs on the blue, when I click on that, let's zoom in up to there, it only picks the blue that is within that circle. So if I then hold down the shift key and come over to this bit of blue and click, whoops, I didn't click on the blue apparently. Let's get in, I need a bigger piece. Let's come over in here. Nope. Oh, I can't get to a blue. Let's see. Let's try here. There we go. So now it's hard to see the blue here, but if I turn, in fact, let's do this. I'm going to change it like crazily. I'll make it pure white. See the white now? Or I can make it black. So you can see it's only picking up those things that are the same as what's in the crosshair. That's with auto mask. Let's delete that. If I don't have auto mask on, let's hit K again. If I don't have auto mask on and click on this, it's going to select, oh, I forgot to turn it off. I don't know why I keep hitting that key. Let's K again. K with auto mask off. If I select in this blue, notice it picks up everything. It's whatever's within the circle. So the difference is auto mask is only going to select things within the circle you've chosen that match the value of the pixels in that crosshair in the middle of the circle. If you turn on auto mask and come over and click, let's click this bit of blue, it's only going to select that and not select anything else. Did that make it clear? I hope that was kind of a sloppy answer, but I hope that made sense. So one last time. One more question.
From Robert. Vignette.
Vignette. All right, we didn't do a vignette on this image. Let's do this. Let's do that to finish this one off. Okay, so here's our edited image. Let's come down to vignette is under effects. And if you're not familiar with vignette, what I recommend you do is for the amount, come down to the top slider where it says amount and drag it all the way to the left. And then you're going to see a pure black vignette. Now you can decide where you want the areas to darken. So if I change the midpoint, if I push it out, it pushes it more to the edges. If I drag it this way, it brings it into the middle. 50% is good. I generally like a little bit less than that. And it's personal preference. Get it a little closer to the edges. Then there's roundness, which is, do you want not round at all? Or do you want as round as possible? And again, these all work together. For the roundness, I generally, I think I generally go a little bit less than 50 or a little less than the middle. Feather is how soft that graduation is. You can see you can make it hard or softer. I tend to go softer on that. And then highlights means, do you want to leave the highlights alone inside the vignette? I usually find that's weird, so the answer for me is no. And then after you've kind of got the vignette where you want, then I'll bring it back to -12 or so. That's kind of my default. Something around here. Now, if you look at the image, it really doesn't look like I did anything. But if we click on the eyeball here, we can hide the vignette and you'll see there's before, there's after. So you can see it's subtle, but it's a slight darkening. If you prefer, and it's going to vary depending on the image. Maybe you want a little darker. We'll go to 19 or 20. And again, I turn this on and off and you can see the vignette. And yes, this image definitely benefits by the vignette. Let's go full screen again. So again, here's the original image we started with. And you might look at it and think it's fine, but look what doing the light painting as it draws in, look what the light painting did for that image. It turned something that was okay into something really nice. And that's cool stuff. I mean, this is cool. And again, let's zoom in. We can let it redraw as the software catches up. Come on, you can see that little flicker. It shows its image. So we brought down these highlights. Still a couple of leaves that are maybe a little too bright. Like again, if I was going in for a print, I would look at it at 100% and make sure everything's good. Also notice, by the way, I didn't do any sharpening. This is the raw file. Again, a commercial for the OM cameras. Man, in Lightroom, they come in sharp without you doing anything. And I could even take it one step further. So, in fact, we can hit the I key and let's see. This was shot at ISO 400. So in the shadows, there might be a little bit of grain. We could run it through the denoise in Lightroom, but I really don't think it needs it. And since this was a pano, let's hit I one more time. You can see that this image is little over 10,000 pixels. So even though I'm shooting with a 20 megapixel camera, 10,000 times 10,055 times 4,700 means we're just a hair shy of a 50 megapixel file here. So there you go. Love it. Any other questions?
No.
Okay.
Sharon said your explanation was clear and Annette loves the result.
Okay. Glad you like it. All right. It's time for soup or soups. I thought I took the S off of that. Oh, well. Soup means water. So we're going to travel to Venice. And really tough light. I had taken pictures. I brought this up intentionally. I have photographs I took here at the opposite time of day. I believe this was in the morning. Not the greatest, but interesting stuff going on. But what can we do light-wise to rescue this thing and turn it into an interesting photograph? So let's go to basic. The highlights are way too bright. Let's just cut to the chase. But rather than do it this way, let's go to profile and choose adaptive color and see how much that would help us. That flattened things out a little bit. In fact, we see there's actually a blue sky, and that's actually pretty handy. So let's bring up the shadows from here. Again, they're a little bit too light, but that's okay because they're going to darken down. We're going to add texture. I'm going to continue to try to bring down the clarity a little bit, mostly because if you look at this building, it's drawing attention to it. If I just bring the clarity down a smidge, it has a very slight smoothing to areas of that size, of that detail. So we're going to go with that. Doesn't need dehaze. That would add a little bit of contrast to the shadows. A little bit. Be careful with dehaze because it can be very destructive. And as far as saturation goes, let's see, who was the, yeah, we have a couple people with us tonight who were here. And you guys remember that the water was very green at this point. So something more like that. So we'll add some saturation and vibrance in. All right. This is probably the combination of the sun and the cloud. I'm not going to mess with the sky, though. We're going to concentrate on other parts of the image, again, to change where the viewer is looking for the light. The obvious thing is these barber poles. They're actually for the gondolas. Let's hit K again, and here's where we're going to use auto mask again. Let's make it just about the size of the pole itself. If you have a mouse, mouse with a wheel, you can do it, or you can use brackets. So I'm going to select a little bit up at the top, come down to the bottom, right in the middle, hold down the Shift key, and click once. Yeah, we got a little on each side. Okay. We'll make a little bit smaller one here, and do, again, the same thing. And it doesn't matter that I picked up a little bit. We're just going to add a little bit of brightness to this thing. And it's okay if it goes out of the lines. If it starts to show up, we can get rid of it. And that looks better. I am seeing a little bit of it right here. So what we can do is hold down the Alt key. Watch what happens to the plus. It turns it to a minus. Let's make it a little bit smaller. And I'm just going to drag along the outside where it got a little bit of the bridge. And all better. Okay, so now they're looking better. And we can come over to the mask itself, click on the eyeball, and you can see the before and after. Great. What else? Where do we want people to go in this? What is the purpose of this? Well, I think over here, I think we want to kind of have the arch of the bridge and kind of probably the railing here. So let's hit K. And again, we're going to leave auto mask on, and let's select over through here. I want to get that area and maybe a little bit of this archway. And I think that's it to start. Maybe a little bit here too. And let's see what happens when we bring the brightness up just of that. Oh yeah, see how it's like somebody turned the lights on. And now we're really getting to see the bridge, and it's causing you to focus. Now, while we're here, maybe there's other areas we want to add a little bit to, but not at full power like this. Well, before we even leave this mask, we can bring the flow down now. Bring it down to somewhere between 70 and 80%, and then continue to add. And even though we're at 80%, it's very subtle, and you can see the light just painting in a little bit. And I'm going for areas that are already light. Areas that are dark, I'm going to do something different. And a little bit there too, and we'll bring this up a smidge as well. And again, if we hold down the eyeball, we can see, look now, we started there, and look at the difference where your eye goes. Now, conversely, this building back here, although it really was doing this, is a little too bright. So let's hit K one more time, which will start us off again. I'm going to put our flow back to 100%. And again, we have auto mask on, so it's going to select it. Yeah, it's a little sloppy, so I hold down the Alt key, and I can paint out the parts I don't want it to select. And now let's bring the exposure down for this. It's also, that building's a little bit more yellow. It probably really was. Do I care? Yeah, actually, in this case, I do. I'm going to bring it down because I want to take away the eye's tendency to go to that. And then also while I'm here, I'm going to hit K again. This time we're going to select whatever these things are. I guess they were doors. And we don't have to be particularly tight about these. I'm just going to come in here and click on these. And yeah, it's going other places, and that's okay. Let's bring, because we want it to be a soft transition. So here's what we selected. And I just want to bring them down a little bit. In fact, what I'm going to do is just bring the exposure down a smidge, and I'm going to make the blacks themselves darker. Great. Now this boat, here's a personal preference thing. Do you want the boat to be more prominent? Well, let's say some of you do. So let's get another mask, another K, and we're just going to drag along the boat. And yes, we got some of the water. That's okay. It's reflecting in the water. Let's bring up the exposure on that. Oh, that looks great. And conversely, the water over here is a little too bright. So we're going to hit K again. This time we're going to turn off auto mask because I want it to get everything. We'll get a nice kind of soft transition there. And yeah, I think you're going to get a little to the side of that building, and we're going to bring that down. Good. It's almost like a semi-vignette. All right, so let's hit enter on that. Now let's take a look. I think you're going to be amazed to see where we've come from on this. Let's go to full screen. Here's where we are in the edit. That was the raw file. And just take in how much this bit of painting with light is really going to bring images to life. Now, there's got to be some of you who are being driven nuts by the perspective. Like the bridge is not straight up and down and the buildings aren't straight up and down. Let's go ahead and do a little bit for that while we're here. I know it's driving somebody nuts. So let's go to the vertical slider under transform as we scroll down. And let's drag this to the left. And I'm looking at this arch on the bridge and this building over here, primarily those windows. Now, here's a cool thing. Maybe for some reason I didn't want to lose this bit on the bottom. Let's go to lens corrections. And if we click on manual, we have this distortion slider. And watch this. We can drag this back and forth to straighten out the image. So let's bring that in. And you got to decide how much you want to do. I think about right there. And then with our transform again, we can make sure we're getting as much as possible. Bring the X and the Y sliders. So we bring that down, and I think we're good. What would I do last for this? I don't like the shape of this. I think I want a 4x6 out of this. This is a 3x4, the original. Let's see what a 4x6 looks like. Yeah, a little bit of a crop. I think it's there's not that much going on in the sky. I think something like that's a more powerful image. And again, for those that asked about the vignette, we'll just do a -12 on this one to keep it subtle. And one last thing, I want to create another path of light to guide you into here. And they're going to make this one very subtle. So I'm going to hit K again, get a nice big brush, and we're going to auto mask off. And I'm going to draw a path right up to there. And let's just add up a little exposure. And generally, the way I like to do this is don't look at it as you're adjusting the slider. Look somewhere else. And when you see something changing in the corner of your eye, you're adding enough. So I'm going to look on the other side of the bridge and drag the slider over. And I can see if it's too much, even out of the corner of my eye. But if I just bring it down to there, I think we're there. I think that's pretty good. So let's hit enter on that. And again, we'll look at full screen. There's where we ended up. And there's where we started. A huge difference. And it was all done with light. Cool stuff. Any questions?
No questions.
No. All right, let's move on. Let's see, what time is it? It's already 10.
Okay, now.
I'm sorry, question?
Poles are crooked.
The poles were crooked.
No, they weren't, but they are now.
Well, but they were crooked in real life. I promise you the bridge was straight.
Okay.
The poles in the water are all over the place. I could show you here. I'll show you another. Let's see. I think I have another Venice image I was playing with. No, that's not it.
Okay.
No, that's right. Okay. Look over here. See, the poles aren't. They're in the water. They end up all over the place. So let it go, Paula. Those were crooked poles. Nothing racist about that. There are.
Getting run into.
Yeah, they're always getting run into. They're always bending. But the bridge had to be straight. Now, if you're offended by crooked poles, then you may, of course, click on the crop tool and straighten out so that the pole is straight up and down and you end up with a crooked bridge. Now, if you like that better, it's your photograph. You can do what you want. But in reality, being here, there were the poles were not straight. Yes, question.
From Robert Ferguson, does this adding light path come natural to you, or is it something you learned over time?
Oh, good questions. The question was about the light path. Is it something that come natural or something I've learned over time? I would honestly say it's a combination of the two, because when I was doing film photography way back when, burning and dodging was a standard thing when I was dealing with landscapes. Not product photography as much, but for landscape photography, always. And one of the masters of that was Ansel Adams. If you ever get a chance, I'm pretty sure, I don't know if they made a book out of it, but there was a traveling show that showed his images printed straight from the negative and what he did with them in the darkroom. And the amount of burning and dodging is what made the photographs great. Right off the negative, they were but the burning and dodging is what did it. So I've been doing it since my film days in the darkroom. I've just found this really makes it quite powerful, and it's certainly also a lot more forgiving. If you screwed up in the darkroom, you wasted a print. And here, if it's too bright or dark, you just readjust the sliders. But that's why I'm talking about the thought process about what to look for. And in fact, let's do that again with this next image. With our appetizer, what I've got is a series. I'm not going to show you the pano construction. That's not what we're talking about tonight. But here's the 3 shots that made up this panoramic. And here's the raw file that ended up. This is in Sedona. This is called Courthouse Rock here, and that's called Bell Rock. What was important? Well, I'm a little underexposed, I guess, but I was concerned about these clouds. And if you look in here, they're really beautiful. And I did not want to clip those. And if you look up underneath the histogram, you can see the red is 95.1. That's really about as bright as I was willing to go. But let's make a virtual copy of this. Let's go up to our basic panel and try adaptive color again. And that's already a great help. I want to go take a look at these clouds, though, because they might have gotten a little too bright. They're at 97. That's getting dangerously close to 100. So I'm going to bring the highlights down on this. Oh, look at the sky. That looks much better. It's also started to show up the foreground a little bit. And what I always ask people to do when we're out in the field is, before you leave a spot like this, is to stare at the shadows. Stare at this part with your eyes. And what you're going to see is that they're not that dark. It's just that your camera can't record it this way. In fact, Gloria, you're here. You're somewhere in here. I talked about this a lot when we were on our last waterfall trip.
Right.
That before you left, stare into here and burn in your mind, really, how dark was this stuff? It was nowhere near this dark. So we have to go in and fix that. So let's get a brush. Nice big one. We'll turn on auto mask, and I'm just going to select this entire bottom. Now, could we have done this with the auto mask where ask it to pick up foliage? Maybe, but sometimes it's just easier to do this. So I'm going to bring up the exposure a bit until, I could make it crazy. Let's bring it up enough that I can see what I've got selected. And oops, I got sloppy there. It actually picked out the mountains behind. That's why it's doing that. That's odd. Let's see. All right, I've got that. Now, when we do this, also understand that your camera can only see one color temperature. And obviously this stuff in the shade is a very different color temperature than the stuff that's in the sun. So what do we need to fix that? Let's add it's gone a little too cold. Let's add a little bit of warmth and a little bit more green, and then add a little bit more saturation into that. Yeah, that's better. We're still not done, though, because how this might really look is the stuff right at the bottom is going to be a little darker. So let's hit K again, and we'll come in just the bottom half. And again, I have auto mask off because I want the transition to be very smooth from one to the other. And now let's bring the exposure down. And that's great. What doing this does is, first of all, now we've got enough detail that we can see rather than it being black. But the transition from the real dark to the slightly dark is providing a lovely base for the rest of the image. We might not end up using all this when we're done. In fact, I don't think we will. Now let's come in and deal with the stars of this show. Let's hit K. And the auto mask is on. Let's actually get the rock formations up in here. These are the stars. And yeah, I'm a little sloppy with the sky, but the sky is something you can be sloppy with in this, because I'll show you why in a second. I'm even going to come in the tree, and again, here's where the auto mask comes in. I'm going to click with that little plus sign right in that one little bit of rock hiding through the tree, and notice it picked it without touching the tree. Now, we got a little bit in the sky, and we missed a spot here. Oh, I got some in the foreground. This is not perfect, because if the thing you're next to is almost the same color, it's going to pick some of it up. But the sky is easy because I can just click on subtract sky rather than have to go in and fix around, and you'll notice all this stuff up here just disappeared. So again, different color temperatures in this scene. Let's add some warmth to this. Oh, that's what these rocks look like. You ever been here? This, yes, I know some of you have been here. This is the Oak Creek side of Sedona. This is the color that these rocks were. Great. Let's hit enter and be done with that. So again, just as a starting point, let's go to full screen for a second. Here we are right now. That's what we started with. So the exposure was made to make sure the clouds were safe because they're beautiful. And we were able to turn it into here, but we're not done. Because now we've got 3 elements, which is good. I think Bell Rock, which is the one over here, I think it's a distraction. I think we need to pick what is it we want to share. Also, this thing over here, this is just a big long mesa that goes on for a long ways, is a little too bright. This is the star in this particular shot, again, which is called Courthouse Butte. Let's hit K to start, and let's come in on this side. And I'm going to try dehaze to darken this thing. Let's see how that does. It'll save us some work here. Yeah, that's better. The highlights are still too bright. Let's bring the highlights down. And actually, this stuff isn't dark enough. Now, also, when you darken these things, they have a tendency to get more saturated. And I don't want that. So we're going to bring the saturation down. Let's bring that down. There we go. I don't want to draw the eye to here. And I'm also going to make the blacks a little darker. There we go. That's better. Now, as I mentioned, make a little smaller brush. For some reason, this foliage here is still too bright. Let's darken that up. I just don't want to call... this is near sunset, so I don't want to call attention to it. I might go in and lighten it up a little bit, but that's good for now. Now let's look at Bell Rock itself. Now, the other problem with this kind of color rock is that when the sun hits it, it does reflect onto everything else. Your brain fixes it, but your camera doesn't. So what do I want to do? So I want to take these shadow areas. So I'm just looking at what's already in shadow. And I'm using this with auto mask on. I want to go after the darkest spots. Let's just drag down there. And I think we got pretty much everybody. Maybe a little bit in there and a little bit in there. All right. What I want to do, since these are already dark, they're in shadow, so they're not getting that sun as much. I'm going to add some blue to it. So let's drag it from yellow to blue, and look at how that makes those areas darker just by changing the color temperature of the light. Wonderful. All right, let's zoom out of that. How else can we draw attention to the main rock? Let's hit K again. And this time again, I have auto mask on. I want to highlight the bright spots. I'm just dragging along those, and then you can also individually click. What do I want for this? Maybe a little saturation. Let's start there. Add some saturation in. Yeah. Maybe add a little yellow, which will warm it up a little more. And then maybe a little clarity to define the rock better. And you know what? I think we're good. I could do more, but actually, oh, one more spot. See this thing right here? Right over here. It's too bright. We got to bring that down as well. Our goal with the burning and dodging is to take away the visual interest of the things that are not important. Now, you can see this is still holding on to its yellow. So we're going to look at that, I'm bringing it way over to the blue, and it still looks right because it is pine trees, shrubs on there. And make sure I got all the little spots that were fading out as we went across the edge there. Maybe a little green in there too. And then maybe bring down the blacks. That looks better. Great. Now let's look at the image. Let's see our final image. What is the star? Now this is a pano. So again, if I hit the I key, it shows me the pixel dimensions. Again, this is almost a 40 megapixel image right now. We don't need all this stuff. And Bell Rock is lovely, but from this vantage point, it isn't the star of the show. So let's go ahead and crop this thing. So I'm going to hit the R for the crop tool. And here's what I'm seeing. This is obviously the star of this shot. We've got the upslope heading up the side of Bell Rock, but this thing is a distraction in part because it has the really dark shadows on its top. I don't even want it in the image, but I do want to take advantage of the upslope because that creates a visual barrier from leaving the frame. As you trace your eyes from left to right and start to head up that slope, that's a visual block that rolls you back down into the image. Also, as I mentioned, notice that the entire height of the rock is about the same size as the brush in the foreground, which means the brush in the foreground, since it's so big, is competing. We need to cut back. So we're going to crop that. In fact, maybe not quite that much, but there, because then I'm going to bring down the sky because the sky is doing the same thing. And I'm going to take my golden ratio grid and put my top line right across that mesa and call that my horizon. And I think that's probably the image. Maybe come in a little from the left. Yeah, I think there's the image. So let's do that, and let's come down to effects and add our vignette. And we forgot one thing. We didn't do our light path. Does this need a light path? And I think the answer is yes. As I'm looking, also there's this mid-ground foliage here. That's a little bit of a distraction. So before we continue, let's select this stuff. I've got auto mask on. I just hit K. And I'm going to come right in the middle of that tree and get that stuff. Let's bring that down. And it's yellow. So we got to pull some of the yellow out of it. So let's make that bluer and greener. In fact, I'm going to pull some of the saturation out of it to make it less interesting and then bring down the blacks. All right. So let's hit enter on that and hit K again. Now we're going to go to our no auto mask, because the difference between having the auto mask off is it feathers more. It's not going to just select what's underneath it. So for the auto mask, I'm thinking something like that. Pretty simple. And let's do this, and then we'll decide if we need more or not. Let's just bring up the exposure a smidge. And as I do this, that's too much. And I don't like it on this thing. So since we're here, I'm going to click on subtract with the brush. And let's get rid of this stuff. I don't want that part of my brightness. And let's turn that on and off and see what that did. Yeah, I want to take it out of here as well. So let's get it out of there. The rest of the places, I'm good. And as I'm looking at this over here, I think we need to bring this back a little bit. So let's just take that area and bring the exposure up just a little. All right, I think we're good. So let's get rid of this stuff. Let's go to full screen. And there we go. And if we look at, that's what we started with. And again, with light, come on, draw back in. There we go. We took it to there. Is there more fine tuning I would do with this? Yeah. As I'm looking at this, and I'm sure you guys can comment this. You can say this too. I think this has gone a little too bright as well. So I can either go to the original mask, or I can hit K again and just turn auto mask back on and come to these areas and just darken that up a little bit. And I think that's better. So there we go. Come on. Yeah, works for me. Any questions? All right.
Jim Cotter says the left side is too bright.
Jim Cotter says the left side is too bright. You know, I don't disagree. This whole thing is too bright. You know what, Jim? Thank you. M.
You're welcome, Joe.
All right, thank you. M. Linear gradient. I'm going to linear gradient this entire thing, and I'm going to subtract the sky so that it just gives that entire foreground, and I'm going to bring the whole thing down a little bit. And again, like I said, this is near sunset. In fact, I'm going to take it one step further and pull the saturation out of it too. Really make it look like this is getting clouded over. And hit enter, and let's see. Yeah, it's better. In fact, I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to hit M again, and I'm going to do a graduated angle here and just bring this entire thing down just a little bit more, just like that. And let's take a look. Better? What do you think, Jim?
That did it.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Always appreciate the input. Okay, main. Holy crap! It's, pardon my French. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I've got a main and a. Can you guys stay a little longer? I've got a main and dessert that I don't want you to miss. So this is a big pano. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. These images, Monument Valley. And this one's going to require a trip into Photoshop. But here's the actual pano after it's been stitched together. So let's make a virtual copy. Obviously, we have a bunch of stuff in here we don't need, but let's just go ahead. And the first problem is I don't like the color of the sky. The foreground's way too dark. Actually, the whole thing's a mess. But if we look at it sharpness-wise, take a look at that. We haven't done any sharpening, and that is tack sharp. So we're good there. So let's go to basic again and choose the adaptive color and see what it does. And it's a start. I do want to bring the highlights down and the shadows up a bit. Yeah, it's a start. Now, this sky color, I already know it's going to be a problem. We could try this. Let's go to the color mixer and get the eyedropper and just come up and pick in there somewhere. And when we see it on the graph here, we can see it's pointing to the cyan side a little bit. This is kind of, this upside down triangle, this V here, is kind of the pure blue. So let's bring it over a little bit into there. And that's better. Still not completely loving it. We have brightness here. Yeah, you know what? I hate to say it, but this is going to have to be done in Photoshop. So we'll just leave it at that for now. Let's deal with the foreground. Actually, so let's select the sky. That's how we're going to get to the foreground. Let's select the sky and choose under its three things there, invert. And there we can have all of that. So shadows are obviously a problem. Don't want to bring up quite that much. Color temperature wise, I'm trying to put myself in Monument Valley mode, a little bit yellower because this is sunset at Monument Valley. So we're going to go, I'm looking at the monuments right now. I'm not concerned myself with the foreground. I'm also going to add some contrast. Yeah, that's better. And we're going to have to do a little light painting on this. This is the West Mitten right there. And also notice there's some haze in the air, whether it was from dust or what have you. You can see the shadows over in here are kind of gray. Now the foreground, again, if you stared at it, it wouldn't look this dark to you. So let's do a graduated with an M and bring this up a little bit. And also temperature-wise, I think this one, let's see, does it need yellow? No, it actually needs a little blue. Let's add a little bit of blue to that and then open up the shadows a smidge more, and we're going to boost the saturation here. So we can bring some of the slight green back to some of the brush there. All right, that's looking pretty good. I think I want to cut to the chase, though, on some of the crop. There's way too much sky, so let's just get rid of it. Yes, I like this little cloud here, but we don't need all of it. I'm going to come all the way down to here. I like the foreground. We have a little bit of road here. You can see right here. It's part of the Valley Road. If I come over here and crop it, it doesn't look right. We're going to have to deal with that somehow else. I'll take a little bit of it off. And then also we have another formation over here. We're going to treat it the same way we did with Bell Rock on that Sedona shot. Just use a smidge of the formation to give us that slope up to stop from leaving the image. Okay, we can work with this. So let's zoom in on the rock. And as we look at it, whoops, sorry, it's gone a little bit too orange. We're going to have to deal with this manually. So I've got K again. I got my brush. Let's just paint on here. and take a look to see what this thing needs. And the things that are also the same color, maybe a little bit over here. And let's go to our color temperature, and let's see what yellow, no. Blue, absolutely. And I'm being highlighted. Yes, a question.
Gloria, what is the difference between duplicate with invert compared to just duplicate?
Duplicate with invert versus just duplicate. Meaning, oh, up in here? Duplicate and invert mask? Yes, duplicate and invert mask will, so if you choose the sky and choose duplicate and invert mask, rather than just invert it and just give you not the sky, it will leave a sky mask in place and then also make you another mask that has everything but the sky. So it creates two masks when you do that. Excuse me. Okay, so we added a bunch of blue into this, which took away kind of that unnatural orange. So that's pretty good. It is kind of flatly lit. And also we have very warm shadows here on these dark areas. So let's once again make a little bit smaller brush. And we'll hit K again. And let's come in and select. And again, notice since I have auto mask on, even though the circle is bigger than what I'm clicking on, it is only selecting those dark shadows. That's the beauty of auto mask. You can be a little sloppy with it. So what I'm after is I'm just going around and clicking. I could make the brush bigger. I'm just clicking on all the spots that have that dark to it. Even right here in the face, notice how it picks up the things that have that shadow and leaves everything else alone. And what I want to do is make that bluer because they're still a little bit too yellow. And watch what happens as I do that. It's going to make them darker. Got to be careful they don't get too blue. In fact, if they start getting actually blue, then bring the saturation down. And it is only doing it on those shadow areas. And again, if we hide the mask we just did, it's a subtle change, but it's enough that it's taking away some of the focus that it is kind of blue. The rest of the stuff over here I think is pretty good. Let's zoom in on the area to the right at some of these other formations. And let's see if we can add a little bit of life into these. Again, I have the auto mask on, but I'm just going to drag over these things because I think we can deal with them as a group. In fact, we can come all the way over here as well. I'm just single clicking, and with the auto mask, it picked up a little bit here, so we hold down the Alt key and we'll just drag over that. Let's add some dehaze into that because that's what's really going on. It's hazy back there. Oh yeah, that was beautiful. Maybe a little less saturation though, because dehaze does increase saturation. Let's bring the saturation down, yes. And maybe a little bluer. Again, I don't want to steal the thunder from our primary formation, which is the West Mitten. Good. All right, one last thing, because then we're going to have to leave Lightroom. I want to pick some of this, just kind of randomly pick some of this brush in the foreground. I'm going to make it a little bluer, a little bit greener. Actually, no, I'm going to make it a little greener, a little yellower. Add some life to that. All right, I think we've done all we can right now for Lightroom. We got to send this thing into Photoshop. So that's Command or Control E or Photo Edit in Photoshop. And Photoshop, when you have color temperature problems, is much better than Lightroom at fixing them. And you've seen this before. I'll show it to you again. All right, so here we are in Photoshop. Collect on our layer and Command J to make a copy of that. And what we're going to do, let's deal with the sky first. So I'm going to select the sky. All right, so the sky is selected, and now I'm going to do a color temperature, not a color temperature, a color balance adjustment layer. So go to the half white, half black circle, click on that. These are adjustment layers, and we're going to use color balance. All right, so let's zoom in on the sky a little more, and we've got 3 different sliders. So I'm going to add a whole bunch of red, a whole bunch of cyan. So you got to see which one looks better for what you're trying to go for. Strangely enough, I think I want a little red in here, just a little bit. Magenta green, magenta green, magenta. You know, green looks a little better. So we'll add a little green to it. Yellow blue. Yellow blue. Needs blue. And this is just for the midtones. And this is the beauty of Photoshop because you have midtones, highlights, and shadows separated out. So cyan, red, cyan, red. This one's a little tougher. Maybe just a little bit of red. All right, magenta, green, magenta, green. I think a little magenta. And yellow, blue. Blue again. Need some blue. And then lastly, the shadows. Cyan. Definitely not red. It's making it go purple. Maybe just a smidge of cyan. Green, magenta. Look at how magenta makes it look better. That one's kind of obvious. It's making it more blue over here. And then lastly, blue, yellow, blue, yellow. This is somewhat subjective, this one. I don't want to call attention to the sky too much. I might leave it alone. Maybe just a smidge of blue. All right, so this was probably a fairly subtle adjustment, but since we selected the sky first before we chose our adjustment layer, notice there's a mask here. So if I hold down the Alt key and click on the mask, we get to see there's the mask. So it's only allowing this adjustment to show up on the white areas. And if we temporarily hide this, you get to see, look at the color temperature of the sky, how it's changed. It's taken away kind of the weird greenness